Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. Here you go again. We have another situation where police take a black life and those police are not held accountable for their actions. Today, State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby decided to drop charges against the remaining officers who were involved in the killing of Freddie Gray. And just to refresh your memory, Freddie Gray was stopped by the police without any real justification. Simply for looking at an officer, the officers felt that they were justified in chasing him down, catching him, and arresting him. After they arrested this brother, you can see that when they put the cuffs on him and they're taking him to the wagon or to the van, you see that he's already injured. He's limping, he's screaming, he's has facial expressions of pain. So they put him in the van, shackled and helpless, head first. They don't put a seatbelt on him. They just put him in there. Again, they had no reason to arrest him. No charges were filed against Freddie Gray. No seatbelt. So they put him in there in a precarious and dangerous position. While they're riding around in this van, Freddie Gray sustains a severe injury to his neck. His neck is shattered into pieces. As I said before, one of the examiners said that his neck felt like a bag of rocks, and they asked, "What the hell did y'all do to him?" So you had this young man, his neck is shattered, he's in a coma for a week, and then he passes away. And let me just step back for a little bit. While he was in this van, he asked for medical attention on at least for medical assistance at least twice. At least twice, and no one responded to his request. They just let him suffer. And this brother ends up dying with a broken neck. And the judge and these stinking police expect us to believe that he broke his own neck and that none of these officers are responsible. There have been many legal commentators who have said there were sufficient facts for a fact finder to reach the conclusion that these officers were guilty of reckless endangerment and misconduct in office at bare minimum. But you had this judge who acquitted three of the officers, despite all the evidence that was presented. Acquitted three officers. Just let them go after taking this black man's life. That is just truly troubling. Another example of how black lives don't matter in this society. And the thing that makes this so much more painful is that you have a black mayor, you have a black um, judge, you have a black prosecutor, and at the time when the suit was originally filed or the criminal charges were filed, you had a black commissioner. And even in that scenario, black lives still do not matter to this criminal justice system. So my anger is not directed at Marilyn Mosby. I understand why she made her decision. My anger is directed at the system. My anger is directed at the judge. My anger is directed at the police union. This sister knew that the same judge that acquitted the first three officers was going to hear these subsequent cases. She knew that more likely than not, the officers would request a bench trial. which would go back before the same judge who has proven that he did not agree with the state's theory of the case. So it would have been a waste of time and resources for the state's attorney to try these other cases, unfortunately. Unfortunately, I mean, that's the situation. So it is just a shame that you have a black judge who doesn't have the courage to do the right thing, doesn't have the courage to look at the facts and the law and reach a conclusion that will hold these killers accountable. So now they walk, and they may be back on the force. So often people say, well, there's only a few bad apples. This is a problem of a few bad apples. That's what we hear all the time. We constantly hear about examples of all these good police that care so much about our community. But my question is, where are these good police? Apparently, they're not in the police union because the police union rallied around these killers. They protected them, they defended them, they insulated them. It seems like if they were really concerned about upholding the law and they were really concerned about protecting the people, then they would be the first ones to demand that those officers be held accountable. It's a disgrace. I understand what kind of pressure the sister was under. And I salute her for continuing despite the pressure, continuing as far as she could go. There were threats against her life. Are defamation lawsuits filed against her. You have one of these right wing legal experts who actually filed a bar complaint against the sister to have her disbarred so that she can no longer practice law. These are the kind of people that we're dealing with. This is the kind of system that we're dealing with, a system that is designed to protect these police officers, whether you're talking about the local level or the federal level. There's something that has to change with this system. The system needs to be fundamentally changed, and that's something that she pointed out. And I'm talking about Marilyn Mosby in her press conference. She talked about, even though the case was dismissed and all that kind of stuff, she talked about how there were some tangible gains as a result of her work. She talked about how now there are body cameras. There will be body cameras on police officers. There will be cameras in the vans, from what I understand. Um, Now the policy is clear about people being seat belted when they get in these police vans. The policy is clear now with respect to requests for medical attention. And she outlined how there have been changes in the use of force policies, as well as software verification that people had gone through um, software verification that people were aware of the policy with respect to um, buckling in suspects and all that kind of stuff. So there have been some tangible gains. Um, so I mean, that is something that is commendable, but I don't think that that's going to fundamentally change the nature of the system. It may make some kind of progress, but it's not nearly enough. This whole system needs to be fundamentally changed. One thing she talked about is how the legitimacy of the prosecution was affirmed in several different ways. She talked about how it was affirmed when the grand jury decided to indict. She said it was affirmed um, with the 135 motions that were filed and granted or denied. She also talked about how the higher courts compelled the officers to testify against other officers, how that was a victory, affirming the legitimacy of the case. And she also talked about how the courts rejected 13 motions for dismissal. Those rulings established some legitimacy in the prosecution's efforts. So those are some of the points that she made. So again, this is just a disastrous situation. You have another black man killed without justice. And when you see these kind of results, despite her assertions about some changes that have been made, a result like this causes the people to lose complete faith in the criminal justice system. I think that at this point, people are so disillusioned that they didn't even expect any of these officers to be convicted. And that's part of the reason why you had the rebellions last year, because the people have lost hope. As far as they're concerned, Freddie Gray is them. Freddie Gray could be their brother, their father, their friend, their cousin. Freddie Gray is us. So when we see this brother killed and there's no justice, that just makes it clear that there's no justice for us. Despite the appearance of some kind of progress in the terms of black judges, black prosecutors, black mayors. And that just brings me to another point. I was watching Stephanie Rollins Blake do an interview about this, and she talked about it in such a detached, unconcerned manner. She didn't have any kind of compassion in her heart for Freddie Gray. And I found that to be disturbing. I found it to be sickening. And frankly, it just made me feel glad that she is leaving office, because we deserve better than that. This is an outrage. And, the people have had enough. You can only push the people so far before they take matters into their own hands.